In palaces made of gold, it wasn't always the sword that destroyed queens. It was the silence of the crowd, the mocking glance of courtiers, the carefully staged rituals of shame. While royal men fought battles outside the walls, they waged another war inside, a war of humiliation, control, and psychological domination, and their victims were often the very women they once crowned. In royal history, kings didn't just execute wives who failed them. Many preferred a different form of punishment. Public humiliation rituals, slow, drawn-out ceremonies designed to erase a woman's dignity before her life was taken, or before she was allowed to live with that pain forever. Take the tragic case of Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII of England. Before she was beheaded in 1536, Henry made sure she would be publicly destroyed, not just physically, but spiritually. Anne was forced to stand trial in front of 2,000 spectators in the Great Hall of the Tower of London, not as a queen, but as a traitor, an adulteress, and a witch. She was accused of sleeping with 5 men, including her own brother. Most historians agree these charges were fabricated, but Henry didn't care. He had already lost interest in Anne, and her failure to give him a male heir was the real crime. But instead of quietly executing her, he orchestrated a ritualized courtroom theater, a humiliating event where nobles, soldiers, and commoners could all feast on the fall of a woman once treated like a goddess. And arrived in a plain gray gown, stripped of her crown and jewels. Her voice shook as she pleaded not guilty, but no one listened. The public spectacle was the point, a message to the court. This is what happens when a queen fails her king. Even her execution was a performance. Henry hired a special French swordsman instead of an English axeman, not to show mercy, but to make it cleaner, more theatrical. It was as if her death had to be artful, a final, elegant humiliation. But not every queen was killed. Some were kept alive to suffer, degraded in front of their entire court. In Imperial Russia, the concept of public punishment extended to emotional torture. Tsar Peter III was known to publicly insult his wife, the future Catherine the Great, calling her ugly, stupid, and barren in front of the court. He referred to her as that German cow, and once forced her to watch as he played with his mistress in the palace gardens. When Catherine tried to distance herself from the humiliation, Peter punished her with ritualized shaming dinners, placing her at the far end of the table, denying her food until others were served, and mocking her with jokes about her body and behavior. This wasn't just cruelty, it was a calculated power game, a way to remind everyone that no one, not even a future empress, could escape public subjugation. Similar patterns appeared in the East. In Tokugawa-era Japan, empresses and royal concubines were often subjected to shame processions. If a woman was suspected of adultery or defiance, she would be forced to walk through the inner palace in full ceremonial dress, without makeup, a clear marker of disgrace. The court would line the walls silently, watching her pass with heads lowered, not out of respect, but out of ritual. Sometimes, the woman would be made to bow to every servant she passed, reversing the traditional roles. This symbolic act reduced her to below a maid, and she had to do it with grace, without tears, because any emotional outburst would be considered further proof of her unfitness to rule. In one recorded case, a noblewoman who resisted this procession was stripped of her robes and made to crawl across the court's tiled floor, as punishment for defiance. She later disappeared. Some say she was poisoned, others believe she was forced into a secluded monastery, silenced forever. But humiliation wasn't always imposed by men alone. In some royal systems, like the Mughal Empire, queens and concubines humiliated each other through rituals encouraged by kings. One emperor allowed his favorite to assign punishment tasks to rival women, such as massaging her feet in front of the court, or singing lullabies to her children. One infamous practice involved forced public mourning. If a favored queen died, the others were required to shave their heads, dress in white, and mourn her as if she were their mother, even if they hated her. Refusal was treason. Participation was self-erasure. So why did kings, surrounded by luxury, power, and respect, need to publicly degrade the women closest to them? The answer lies in insecurity and control. Kings were expected to be divine, godlike, untouchable, but their queens were constant reminders of their human weaknesses: jealousy, fear, infertility, betrayal. By humiliating their wives publicly, the walls meant to trap them couldn't contain their rage. The rituals meant to break them only sharpened their instincts. In royal courts where queens were shamed for failing to bear sons, for aging, or for simply speaking, some refused to be reduced to silence. They turned humiliation into fuel, and in doing so, became some of the most dangerous women their kingdoms ever produced. Let's return to Catherine the Great. Once mocked as a barren German cow by her husband, Tsar Peter III, for years, Catherine endured Peter's public cruelty. He insulted her intelligence, paraded his mistress through court, and humiliated her at royal banquets. Asterisk, but behind the scenes, Catherine was building an empire of loyalty. She read philosophy, learned military structure, and won the hearts of key generals and noble families. She understood something Peter never did. Humiliation doesn't erase intelligence. It awakens strategy. In 1762, Catherine she launched a coup d'état, backed by military units loyal to her. Peter was arrested and later died under mysterious circumstances. Catherine then crowned herself Empress of Russia, not as someone's wife, but as a ruler in her own right. The woman he humiliated became the most powerful monarch in Europe. Across the world, another tale unfolded in Korea's Joseon dynasty, where Queen Anhan was falsely accused of witchcraft by her husband's mistress. Lady Jang the king, weak and paranoid, had Queen Anhan publicly deposed, her name stripped from royal records. Asterisk, for years, Anhan lived in isolation, treated like a criminal while Lady Jang enjoyed royal favor. But Anhan did not vanish. Asterisk, her allies worked silently, documenting Lady Jang's abuses and gathering support from Confucian scholars and court ministers. After years of plotting, King Sukjong was pressured to review his decision. The court turned against Lady Jang, who was eventually executed for treason, and Queen Anhan was restored to her throne. Asterisk, she had not just survived the ritual humiliation, she had reversed it. Asterisk, in Persia, Queen Tamina was forced to perform a purity ritual after being falsely accused of infidelity. The ritual involved appearing half-naked before the court's holy men, pleading her innocence while being examined like livestock. Asterisk, she did not cry, she did not scream. Instead, she endured. Asterisk, once proven innocent, she demanded vengeance. Using her remaining political clout, she poisoned the religious leader who arranged the ritual, and then slowly took control of court decisions while her husband descended into illness. By the time the king died, Tamine had already placed her son as heir, becoming Queen Mother, the most powerful position in the realm. Her name, once spat out in shame, was now spoken in fear. Asterisk, in France, Marie Antoinette offers a more tragic, but equally powerful case of reclaiming dignity. After years of being mocked for her Austrian roots, her extravagant lifestyle, and her failure to produce a male heir, she became the public scapegoat of the French Revolution. Asterisk, were endless cartoons of her naked in bed with other nobles, rumors of incest with her son, even accusations of witchcraft. But when she stood trial, her defense was chillingly dignified. Asterisk, when asked about the charge of incest, she refused to respond. Instead, she turned to the courtroom and said, asterisk, if I have not answered, it is because nature itself refuses to respond to such a charge made to a mother. Asterisk, there was silence. Even her enemies were shaken. Though she was guillotined, she died with more poise than the men who tried to shame her. Asterisk, but not every revenge needed blood. Some queens used silence. Asterisk, in ancient China, Empress Lu Ji was once sidelined by her husband, Emperor Gaozu, who favored a concubine named Qi. Lu Zhao was forced to perform servant duties while Qi enjoyed royal attention. But after the emperor's death, Lu Zhi took full control of the court. Asterisk, she captured Lady Qi, cut off her hands and feet, blinded her, and locked her in a cell, calling her the human swine. She then ordered that Qi's son be executed to secure her own son's throne. Asterisk, it was a terrifying vengeance, not just physical, but symbolic. Lu Zhi turned her own humiliation into a mirror and made her rivals suffer the same, only worse. Asterisk, these aren't just acts of revenge, these are historical warnings about what happens when women pushed to the edge decide to push back. Asterisk, royal humiliation rituals were never just about shame, they were about reminding everyone who held power. But these stories prove something else. Asterisk, when humiliation fails, a queen is born. Asterisk, and when queens rise from disgrace, they are more dangerous than any sword, any army, any king.